Looking back through history, I think Rogers City was the very first place that I ever spoke out outside of my home church. Many years ago. Thank you again for inviting me here, and I count your pastor as a dear friend. Got to get used to this. I got my comfort spots in my pulpit at home. I've only spoke out, a handful of times over the years, and I will still get nervous. My knees will still knock. I still don't like speaking in front of people, even though I've been a pastor for a good number of years. Turn your Bibles over to Philippians chapter 1 and verse number 27. Philippians 1 and verse number 27. If ever a time that we have gone through some hardships as a church, not even just Rogers City, Boone, or anywhere you go, it is right now. It has been the most trying times that I've ever seen or encountered as a pastor or even as a Christian over the last several months, since we've all been introduced to that wonderful phrase, COVID-19. And because of that, we've had to learn to adjust a lot of things and change how we live life. But through it all, I've noticed, and as we started up the conference this year with the school kids and the academies and stuff, talking with all of the different preachers, there's a common thing that has happened amongst all of them. You've had your folks who have been faithful, and you've also had folks who have been faithful their entire lives, who we haven't seen again, and it's been happening everywhere. And though that's not going to be the theme of the message, it does play a part. And there's some thoughts in there that I have that I thought would be helpful to us in that area. But as I continue, I want to talk about some lessons that we can learn from geese or from nature and what God has shown us. So turn over to Philippians chapter 1 and verse number 27. Let our conversation be as it becometh the gospel of Christ, that whether I come and see you, or else be absent, I may hear of your affairs, that you stand fast in one spirit, with one mind, striving together for the faith of the gospel. And that thought there, that towards the middle of the verse in the end, that you stand fast in one spirit, with one mind, striving together for the faith of the gospel. If ever, even with the election coming up and with all of the controversy on all what we should or shouldn't do, the church needs to stand together in one spirit and in one mind, more so than I've ever seen before. And we're being challenged in our churches to not have services. We're being challenged at all kinds of things. And anytime there's something happens, there's always, if you have a choice to make, you ask people their opinion, you'll have however many people you ask, that's how many opinions you'll get. The fact that you guys were brave enough to put carpet in the middle of this, I don't know, man. That is a brave thing. And I'm excited that the church looks fantastic, by the way. I know it's not quite finished, but it really looks, when I came in, it looked bright and inviting. And if I could go back to my days of camp inspector, I got the smell of fresh glue and sweat. No, I'm just kidding. But it looks very inviting, very nice. I really like the I don't know, I'm not going to, but I like it. It looks nice. It's comfortable. But let's open in a word of prayer, and then I'll get to preaching. Drew told me I had to be done at 7, and he'll pay me $5 for every minute before 7. So I don't know how big his checkbook is, but no, I'm just kidding. Let's pray together. Lord, I love you, and I thank you for today. And Lord, I need your help this evening. Lord, I pray that you'd fill me with your spirit and your power. Help me to say the things I should, to leave out those I should as well. Lord, I pray that you would give each and every one of us here tonight what we're in need of from your word, and we'll thank you and praise you in Jesus' name. Amen. This last week in Bible class, I taught about the ant and how we can learn from nature in Proverbs chapter 6. And we can look at in Mark chapter 6 or Matthew chapter 6, the fowls of the air, the birds. We can look at those and we can see all of the things that God has put in place. Well, tonight I want to talk about geese. Why? Because I am. And I'm excited about this message. I have preached it a couple times in the past. And is this all the different things? I'm going to have to wander around. I said this morning I have to wander so that my mind doesn't. And I'm not sure how that works. But when we think about the geese, we think about their formation and we think about how they fly. And there's some very interesting facts that come along with that. And I'm just going to spend a few moments talking about them. And there's really some great truths that we can learn from observing God's nature and His creation. And this year in our school, every morning for devotions, we have a devotion book that talks about some of the nature and the natural things that God has that we can see and that we can enjoy, and how He had a part in so much of it. So number one, geese share a common, and they go in the same direction. They share things in common, and they're headed in the same direction. When you see the formation of geese, what are they? They're in a giant V, and they're following each other. And there's some reasons for that, and it makes a lot of sense. First of all, as each goose flaps its wings, it creates an uplift for the birds that are following it. So as that first one starts to push his wings down, it creates that uplift, where the next one makes his job a little bit easier, and so on down the line. They say that it's 71% greater or easier for the ones following. That's a big difference. That's a huge difference. 71%, I mean, that's huge. If I could find a spot where I could get 71% off on clearance, I'm there. You know, it's a huge difference. So when you think about the formation and how that first goose flies, it's helping everybody else behind them. And there's a reason, and it makes sense. They use, this word that I'm going to use, synergy. I didn't know what that word meant until a few months ago. I'm going to stand on this. I'm not sure what it is, but I'm standing on it anyways. That word synergy. It's basically putting things together for a greater outcome or a greater purpose. And the illustration that we used, we were at work one day. We were in a manager's meeting, and we're sitting there talking, and they brought that title up, and one of my coworkers is like, I know what that is. Like, what is it? You don't know what it is. I made fun of him, and he's like, no, this is what it is. So he gave us a definition, and I liked it so much I've used it several times. He said, so if you have a horse who's hauling logs out of the woods, as a logger would use, and if that horse by himself, when you hook him up to a log, can haul 500 pounds of weight coming out by himself. That sounds great. You get a second one, and he can do 500 pounds as well. Now, you would think that if you put them together, they would haul 1,000 pounds. But the truth of the matter, it's more like 1,500 or 2,000 pounds. Because of them working together, because of that word that they use, synergy, because they're working together, it makes it so they're more productive, and they can get more things accomplished by doing the same work that they're doing. It's not that they're working any harder. They're partnered up with someone, and it makes it easier for them to get the job done. And if we as Christians would learn how to work together with each other, and we would learn to help each other out, we could be more effective. We could be a better witness of all of those different things. We could be so much more profitable as Christians by getting more done than if we fight it all on our own. Those geese know that if they stay in that formation, that uplift from the one before them makes their job easier, and they can continue on. You know, it doesn't take long if you take a Christian and you pull them outside of church and they're by themselves, they don't last very long because the pressures are too great and the challenges are too strong, and they tend to give up because it's so much more difficult than if they just stay with the group. They share that common goal. They all have the same sense of direction, the same sense of community, and they're headed to a certain spot. Many of you know I work a job outside of the ministry. I work at FedEx. as I'm an operations manager there. And half of my job is to motivate people, and the other half is to try to get them to believe they're capable of doing something. Most of the time we hire anybody who has a pulse, and that's about the criteria. If you have a pulse and you know how to come to work, we don't even care if you come to work every day anymore. If you come in, you're there. It's all good. No, I hope this isn't being recorded. I could lose my job for that. No, I'm just kidding. No, but they come into work, and we have to motivate them and try to get them to do as much as possible in the time frame that we have. And we use things like just these motivational skills. But every once in a while, if you can put, normally it's one person unloading, one person scanning, and the stuff comes out of the trailer. Everybody's happy. But if I can put two people in a trailer, they get done faster, obviously, and the burden isn't as hard on them, and they enjoy what they're doing because they're carrying on a conversation, and they don't even realize that they're working. Because it passes the time and it passes off what they're doing, but they still get the job done. And they're getting it done faster, and they don't mind the work because they have somebody there with them doing the work by their side. Number 2, geese benefit from mutual edification. In other words, when a goose falls out of formation, it suddenly feels dragged. It suddenly feels the pressure from not being with everybody else. And the resistance of flying alone makes a huge difference in their life. It moves quickly back into the formation to take advantage of that uplifting power that they received from those other group geese in that formation. And that power, they feel it immediately. The best way that I can think of that is driving down the highway, and you're driving along, and then you roll your window down. And you stick your hand out the window, all of a sudden you feel that pressure, and it flings your arm back. And if you had a convertible, and you were sitting in the convertible, and you stood up, you would feel all of that in your face, and your hat would fall off, and your hair would get, most people's hair would get messed up. But you would feel that resistance blowing at you, because when you're in the car, you're not feeling it. That windshield and the car protects you from that. But the moment you step out from it, you begin to feel that resistance. You begin to feel that pressure of the wind coming at you. And that's what happens with those geese when they're flying along. They're like, you know what, maybe I don't want to go along with everybody else. And they step out on their own, and they automatically feel that resistance. And it's going to slow them down, and it's going to be challenging for them. And they have to either work really hard to get back where they were, or they begin to drop out. The thing about that, though, is when that person drops out or that goose drops out, everybody else carries on. Everybody else is going to continue to go forward. They're not going to stop what they're doing because you dropped out. If every time in Christianity, every time somebody dropped out, we all stopped, we wouldn't get anywhere. We wouldn't get anything accomplished for the cause of Christ because we'd constantly be stopping and getting people. Now, I'm going to get to the importance of people and why we need to help them in a little bit. But they feel that resistance, and it causes them to stumble. It causes them to fall. It causes them to have some problems in their life. If we have as much sense as a goose, then we would stay in the formation with those headed where we want to go. If we're continuing to stay on that same path, we'd only be the smart thing to do is to stay in that formation. We are willing to accept their help and to give our help to others. Strong Christians appreciate the value of mutual edification. In other words, helping others out. Turn over to Hebrews chapter 3. Hebrews chapter 3. And verse number 12. Hebrews 3 and verse number 12. Hebrews 3, verse number 12 through verse number 14. Take heed, brethren, lest there be in any of you an evil heart of unbelief in departing from the living God. But exhort one another daily, while it is called today, lest any of you be hardened through the deceitfulness of sin. For we are made partakers of Christ, if we hold the beginning of our confidence steadfast unto the end. That verse number 13, but exhort one another daily, while it's called today. When people fall out of that formation, we need to do our best to exhort them. And I even heard testimony tonight about that, encouraging and helping others out. We need to really work on encouraging others. We need to work on lifting up those that have fallen and lifting up those that are hurting and those that are struggling and those that are being challenged because for whatever reason they fell out. And we need to do what we can to help lift them up, bring them back in. Bring them back in. And probably more now, I still believe more now than ever before. Because we've seen a lot of things change in the way we do everything. Hebrews chapter 10 and verse number 24. Let's turn over there real quick. Hebrews 10 and verse number 24. Hebrews 10 and verse number 24. And let us consider one another to provoke unto love and to good works, not forsaking the assembling of ourselves together, as the manner of some is, but exhorting one another, and so much more as ye see the day approaching. Exhorting one another. First of all, not forsaking the assembling of ourselves together. And I know the Sunday night crowd is probably the ones that are your more faithful people. They're here usually when there's a blizzard outside, or when it's raining outside, or when the sun's out, or any of those other reasons that we hear for excuses. You're usually the group that's here, and I understand that, but there's a lot of folks who aren't so faithful, but they forget the fact that we need to be together. We need to be together through this whole thing. And it is so important for churches to be together because we're a family, and we need to grow together, and we need to experience things together. And the messages that are being preached is for everyone. It's not just for one person. It's not just for the one person that the pastor thinks did something wrong that week. No, it's for everyone. There's something in the Word of God for everyone, every week, all the time. That's so vitally important for us to be in church and to hear the gospel. I got real nervous. To be honest with you, I got real nervous when we had to close down the church service and things like that. And I know you guys do things a little different than us, and I understand that. And what works for you was different than us. And the way I looked at it is everybody had to do their own thing because your area is different than my area, and so on and so forth. It didn't matter how or what you did, as long as you did your thing. But after about 2 weeks, we didn't have church services, and the first week I got to admit, it was kind of exciting. We pre-taped everything. You know, we watched the service the next day. It was all good. Everything was pre-recorded on Saturday. I made up a video. We brought it to everybody's house on Saturday. They could put it in their DVD player. That was kind of neat, you know, like I didn't have to, like, the whole thought was, you know, I'm done with church already. And it was kind of neat for about this long. I mean, it was like, I don't know. It was all right. That was 1 week. Second week, I began to have a burning in my heart for church. I was like, this is okay, but I can't do this any longer. I cannot do this any longer. I had to change some things. So we called everybody up and said, listen, we're exempt from this and that. And we gave everybody I said, well, we're going to have church service. So I'm not going to judge you. I'm not going to say anything if you don't come. If you do come, whatever. It's between you and the Lord. I said, but I can't do it. I can't go another week. So we started having our church services and things like that. We had back in the 70s, I think it was, late 70s, early 80s, our church had an issue with church in the parking lot. And I still get comments about that today. But it wasn't church, it was a rock concert. And our church has changed since then. Our music is different than what it used to be. We preach the gospel message, we use the right Bible, and we don't have guitars and drums and everything else that they had. But they literally kicked the barn doors open on a garage barn that they had at the church, and they performed a concert and preached for about 2 minutes and called it a service. Well, I had so many people that wanted to go back that I couldn't do that for my area. That's why I said things worked here great for you guys. They wouldn't have worked for me because I would never have been able to get away from it. Anyways, but that not forsaking the assembling of ourselves together, it burned me up so bad I couldn't do it. I couldn't go on any longer. I began to miss the fellowship of the people. And I know you guys met and you guys still saw each other. We didn't have that. We had nothing. So it was challenging. Anyways, rabbit trail. So important for us to be together. But then if we look further into those verses, it says exhorting one another. Exhorting one another. And that's the part that's really been not a challenge for me, but it's one of those things that I don't do greatly. I have a horrible problem. If you ask your pastor who is the worst person to get a hold of or communicate with, he will say my name. He will say, Pastor Matchinski, without a doubt. I can never reach the man. He never returns a text, a phone call, or anything else. I can see him in person, and he still doesn't acknowledge that. And it's nothing personal. I hate phones. All right, this is a phobia of mine. I hate them. But exhorting someone, taking the time to say, hey, I'm praying for you. Now, I get text messages from other pastors and other people every once in a while. And I'm like, I read that message, and I think, man, I felt good. Thank you for that. And then what do? I don't respond. I don't know. I don't know. I read the message. I thought, oh man, I appreciate that. That was really, he thought of me this morning. I know how much he's got going on. He thought of me. He sent me a text, and that was nice, and that's all I do. I'm working on it. I truly, truly am. Anyways, back to the message. But exhorting one another, it is so vitally important. I am not that's why my wife does a much, much better job than I do. But we said when we moved farther away from everybody that we will probably lose all the people we know because we are horrible communicators in that way. Anyways. So we saw how when they have a common goal, they fly together. They also they edify one another. They lift each other up. And number 3, geese share the burden. They share the burden. I've been in the ministry for a good number of years. And what I've noticed in the ministry is the pastor and the pastor's family and 1 or 2 other couples do all the work in the church. They do almost everything. From the cleaning to the preparing to this and this and this. And I know some things are different in different places, but for the majority of the time, those that we consider our leaders of the church, not only do they lead, but they take care of all of the responsibilities. And you get to come to church and you get to sit in the pew and you get to enjoy all the fruits of the labor of so many people. But with the geese, they share that responsibility. They share that burden. Because as we talked about that lead goose, he has more resistance than anybody else. He's carrying 71% more resistance than anybody else. And what happens is he'll lead that charge, and he's glad to lead that charge, and he carries on, and he carries on, and he goes and goes and goes until he gets tired. And instead of just saying, I'm tired and I quit, I don't want to do it anymore, somebody else needs to step up and says, here I am. I'll take over that responsibility. I'll help you out so that you can get a break, so that you can get rested up, so that you can carry on again another day. Not only with the pastors, I'm talking your Sunday school teachers and your bus workers and all the different people that make up the work of the church. And I know that you guys have a lot of, you have your work days, and a lot of people help with all those things. I get all that. But in large, there's a handful of people doing a lot of the work. And you know what? They're going to get tired. They're going to get older. I don't know what I said anyways. And when they get tired, they need someone to step up and take that charge to lead for a little while. Now, let me put this on record. I am not recommending in any way that you get rid of Pastor Rogers, okay? That is not nothing like that. But I'm saying that there's people that are in charge and they do a lot of work. And wouldn't it be wonderful if somebody came in and said, hey, you know what? Let me help you with that burden. Let me help you with that work. Let me pick up some of that extra slack. Go back to that synergy where two people can do the same job, but it gets done faster and quicker and easier on everybody. Because that formation still needs to fly. Everybody still needs to be in position. It has to be somebody in charge, and we know that. It pays to take turns at the hard tasks in sharing the leadership. The leaders of your church, the leaders they're faced with more challenges probably in a day that you'll ever know. Because most of the time, at least in my experience, most of the time, we just take that on. We just take that resistance that comes at us and we just absorb it. We just say, you know what, I know that's there and we're gonna fight through it, and we're just gonna keep pushing on. I'm not gonna tell everybody every time we have an ache or a pain or that we have something going on that's greater than what we can really handle at that time. We just keep pushing forward. But we'll get tired. We'll get wore out. It becomes more challenging. As members of the body of Christ, we are to do our part. We are to do our part. Whatever it is, whatever your capabilities are, whatever responsibilities you have, do your part. Now, I understand that not everybody's going to preach. Not everybody's going to be in the choir. But there are things that you can do. In fact, I love my family. I love them dearly. But you know what they told me? I'm not allowed to be in the choir. I'm absolutely not allowed to be in the choir. Why? Well, because I usually sit behind them and I'm singing along and I either make up my own words or I'm off tune so bad that I mess them up as they're singing. So they said, you're not allowed. I canceled the choir. We no longer have a choir. That was my decision. No. We all have things that we're capable of doing. I used to be really bad at delegating responsibility. I used to like to do everything myself, and I would never delegated anything. But it came to a point where when I physically and spirit, I just couldn't do everything myself anymore. I started to pass it off a little bit at a time. Now, I still like to know what's going on, and I still like to be in charge. Don't get me wrong on any of that. But it's nice to be able to share that burden and to share that workload with other people. Too often, Christians, they burn out because the brethren won't help out. Why is it that we can't keep a pastor in a pulpit anywhere in America, or the world for that matters? Because they do so much work that they burn out before they ever get any help to help them out. Last weekend, my wife and I and a couple of the kids, we went down to see Mark. And we went down to we were only there a day, and went down, spent the day with him, came back. Since we moved to Boone, we haven't had anybody to clean the church. We've been doing, my wife and I have done almost every week. We do it ourselves, and I'm not complaining. I'm not saying that, I can't believe I have to clean the church again this week. But we do it, and it's just one of those things that we do as part of our ministry and the things we do. But while we were gone, one of the ladies of the church knew we were gone and knew how busy and things we are. Would you clean the church for us? Just clean the church. And for us, we got back Saturday night. It was around 10 o'clock, which means we would have had to clean the church after we got back or early that morning before church. But she just said, you know what? I know they're gone. I know that I'm going to go in there. And she cleaned the whole church. It's a simple task. Took her maybe, a couple hours or whatever. But it was a way that she could use something that she had to help out those that were leaders. You know what? That was a huge burden lifted off of me. And more so my wife, because she does a lot of the cleaning and I just kind of walk around and, but it was a huge burden lifted. That was a simple task. She realized that there was a need, She recognized that there was something that she could do, and she fulfilled that void. And if we had more people that with that mindset and that thought process, wow, what can I do to help my pastor out today? Talked about people who they burn out and they falter along the way, and we have geese that fall off the line all the time. And as I thought about that, they get that resistance, and they get that. We mentioned that that when a goose falls out of formation, it suddenly feels the friction of flying alone. It then quickly adjusts to its mistakes and moves back into formation. And it takes advantage of that lifting power of the birds immediately in front of them. But the lesson we can learn is to be humble, to admit the challenges that we face, and we seek them. When we seek them, that we're going to need to get some help soon. What problems is when we falter, when we fall off the line, we don't always know how to fix that mistake. We don't always know where to go to get that help that we need. We know that there's a problem. We know that there was a mistake. We know that there was an issue in our life. Maybe we fell into sin. Maybe we had something else in life that happened. And we know that there was a problem. First, we need to get over the fact that we need to humble ourselves and ask for help. But we need to make sure we go to the people that can help us. When I was 18 years old, I was a typical teenager, just living my life however I felt and pleased. But God had bigger plans for me in my life than I ever dreamed of or ever thought of. And He began to work in my life, and before I even knew what was happening, He began to work on me. He began to put a desire in my heart for something greater than what I was doing. He put a desire in me not only for my eternal salvation, but He put a desire on me to do something more than what I was doing. And I knew that something had to change in my life. I knew that the path I was on was not a good one, and I was headed for disaster. I knew that I needed help, but I had no idea where to go. I knew that there was mistakes in my life, and I knew that there was problems, but I had no idea who to ask or where to go. And we find Christians in that same spot who fall out of formation. Maybe they stumble along the way, and they fall away from the flock. Maybe they have a problem that's come up. Maybe there's a sin in their life. There's an issue that's caused them to stumble. Whatever it is, big or small, whatever it is, what the truth of the matter is, they've faltered. They know they've made a mistake. But until they humble themselves and ask to get back in and to figure that out, they're going to continue to falter and to fall farther behind. We need to help those folks, and I'm going to move to my next point with that. Number 4, geese encourage those that lead. Geese encourage those that lead. The geese flying in the formation honk to encourage those up front to keep up their speed. It is unlikely that they're complaining about what the lead goose is doing. They're not sitting back there saying, if I was in charge, we'd have got there faster. I'd have turned left there instead of right. If I was in charge, I'd have been... that's not what they're saying. I don't know. I don't speak very fluent geese, but if I did, I know that's a... They're back there saying, hey, we see you up there. We know that you're working harder than we are. We know that you have more responsibility in getting us where we need to be. We see that, and we just want you to know, keep moving forward, keep going forward, keep it up. Don't give up, don't give in. Just keep going, keep going. We're going to get there soon, I know it. Words of encouragement, words of edifying, words of strengthening, saying, listen, I see you. It's going to be okay. We're going to get there. We're going to do whatever we can to help you along the way. Not grumbling and complaining, the whole way saying, well, if somebody else was doing it, it would have been better. This would have been much easier if we'd have done it this way. They're not complaining, they're encouraging. One of the things we need to make sure that our honking or our talking is encouraging. One of the things I've learned over the years that some of my fellow manager co-workers haven't figured out yet, that if you encourage somebody, they work harder for you. If you encourage someone, they'll do a better job for you. If you micromanage people, your production goes down the drain. And when you're working in a place that is all about speed and numbers and things like that, every little bit counts. And if you learn to encourage somebody and say, hey, you know what, I noticed what you did. I appreciate that hard work, and keep it up. Give them a pat on the back or a 6-inch pat on the back, whatever you got to do now. And just let them know, hey, they're doing a good job. They're going to work harder for you than if you sit there and micromanage every little thing you do. I found out that if I micromanage people, if I tear them apart every 2 seconds, their productivity goes just horrible. It's absolutely horrible. And I'm not saying if you criticize your pastor, he'll be non-productive. But when we're talking about other Christians, encourage them. Encourage them to read their Bible. Encourage them to be faithful in church. Encourage them to help others when they're struggling. Learn to encourage people. Again, testimony this morning or this evening, we talked to you. Somebody said, I don't remember who, but about encouraging people. We got some people that are very, very heavy-hearted. If they know people that are sick, they're sick. They got people that are having issues and problems, and their hearts are heavy. And not everybody knows how to cast their burdens onto Jesus, or even if they do, they need a word of encouragement. Instead, we like to criticize and make fun and say, well, if you had done it this way or that way, you probably wouldn't have had that problem, and that might be the truth. Learn to encourage. This last couple weeks ago, we had a would-be. And everybody knows when you're stacking and cutting firewood, there's jobs that are easy, and there's jobs that aren't so easy. A couple things I noticed from our would-be. One, we were able to put up all that wood, and in one day we put up 30-some cord, and it was done and stacked, and everything's pretty and put away because everybody worked together. We just worked together, and it was a great day, and it was all done. But I also noticed that some jobs are harder than other jobs. And when we had some trucks that just dumped the wood, and everybody just picked it up and stacked it. But that guy who reaches down every time to bend over and pick up a piece of wood and pick up a piece of wood works a whole lot harder than the guy who's in the middle of the line going like this. And that person wears out. He gets tired. If we encourage them, they'll keep going on, and we can empower them to do their job better. And every once in a while, even pastors, even your Sunday school teachers, even your bus workers, even all those that have a part and play a part, they need a word of encouragement. They needed somebody to say, hey, you know what? I see what you're doing. Keep up the good work. They're going to hear that, and it's going to keep them moving forward. The last thing, Drew, I'm sorry. The last thing is geese care for one another. They care for one another. When a goose gets sick or shot or falls out of formation and goes down, they don't do it alone. 2 other geese go with them. Help nurse them back or help get them up to strength. And then when they do, they'll fly back up into the formation, or if worse comes to worse, they leave them there and they go find another flock because they get to where they're going. They care for one another. They uplift one another. They help one another. We need to do a better job at uplifting those that are fallen and hurt. Many of you know that up until the last few years, my wife and I were youth workers, assistant pastor, youth worker,
whatever else that we got roped into. But we were youth workers, and we saw a lot of teenagers. We worked with a lot of teenagers. And there was a particular incident that I was thinking of the other day. And this young lady, she got in trouble. She got into some sin. And she fell out of church. And my wife and I, for better part of a year, constantly we would go visit her and talk to her and encourage her and say, hey, come on, it's not that bad. You can come back to church. Everything will be okay. Everything's going to be fine. Just come back. They're never going to get better if they don't come back to church. They need the gospel. They need to hear the preaching. And we worked and on this young lady, and we finally, after a great many hours of visiting and prayer and working with this young lady, still apprehensive, her response to us was, if I go, people are going to judge me. People are going to look at me and say, I don't belong here, I shouldn't be here. And they're going to give me that look of disappointment. And I don't know if I can deal with it. I said, surely that can't be the case. Surely if you just come to church, people will be glad to see you. They'll be excited and they'll welcome you back. And they'll be encouraged to see you. This young lady came to church. And instead of being greeted like the prodigal son when he returned, was met with those judgment eyes, the look of disappointment. Instead of saying, I'm so glad that you finally made it back. I'm so glad that you're finally here. I'm excited. Yes, we need to work on that sin. We need to get some things taken care of, and we need to move forward on that. Never are we ever going to excuse sin. But instead of saying, you know what, I'm glad to see you. I'm so excited that you're here. She felt like everybody was judging her. Looked at her with disappointment. That young lady left. She told us after the fact, I will never go to church again. Ever. This young lady who, as far as we knew, was saved, she was baptized, she made a mistake. She fell out of the flock. You ask her today, you're still in contact with her every once in a while, you ask her today, she doesn't believe in God. If you ask her, she'll say she's an atheist. I don't believe that anymore. I was hurt and damaged so bad. And those that should have been there to help me turned their back on me. It's no wonder when somebody falls out, they don't come back. And you don't think a word of encouragement makes a difference? You don't think that saying, you know what, I'm glad to see you. You know what, we all know that they've sinned. She knew she sinned. There was no excuse for it. We knew that. But you know what? God knew that we sinned also. God knew that we were sinners, but yet He still sent His Son for us. And yet we can't give an ounce of forgiveness for somebody else who's trying to make it right in their life. Who are we to say we're any better? We're only one bad decision from falling in sin like anybody else. But by the grace of God, we're not where they are. I know it comes down to choices and it comes down to decisions and things like that. But one weak moment in the flesh, and you'll fall away like anybody else. All because nobody cared for her. Geese know enough to care for those that are hurting. When somebody's struggling, instead of pushing them down, they lift them up. Over the last few months, one of our most faithful families never missed a service. They were there every time the doors were open. They were a part of everything that we did during the church time. There was something going on outside of church. We were usually with them. I haven't seen them in months. Now I've tried, and I know that some things have happened over this course of the months. But I've already decided inside of me, if they do show up or the next time I see them, I'm not going to judge them. I'm not going to say, I can't believe you haven't been to church in 6 months. What's the matter with you? You know better. They know that. They know they should be in church. They'll tell you they should have been in church. Instead, I want to tell them, hey, so glad to see you. Can't wait to meet you, see you again. Can't wait to do the next activity, whatever it is. Encourage them to come back. We're going to have a hard time building all our churches back up. I understand you guys had a good day today, and that's exciting. But it's going to take a while to get some people back in there. Because, you know, we've gotten pretty not lazy, but complacent with not going to church. Pretty easy to watch it online. It's pretty easy to schedule other things around going to church. It's pretty easy to do everything but be in the church house. Not forsaking the assembling of ourselves together. Like I said, I couldn't go much longer. I couldn't go any more than that. It tore me apart on the inside. I felt like there was something wrong. We need to learn from these geese. When somebody's having a difficult time, do your part to help them. Someday it might be you. Someday it might be you who's struggling. And you're going to wish that somebody encouraged you instead of judged you. One of the great things about geese and their migration trail, it's the same one. Similar every year, the same geese fly back to the same spot every year. It's one of the amazing things about the Bible. It's not going to change. It's not going to go anywhere. It's not going to be any different. And I know that if I go back to the Bible, no matter what it is, it'll be the same. Yesterday, today, and forever. We know how to get back. We know how to get others back.